What if the Lone Star never rose? What if the Alamo was remembered not as a heroic last stand before victory, but the prologue to a crushing defeat? Imagine a world where the Texas Revolution failed and Santa Anna's Mexico decisively crushed the rebellion. There's no Republic of Texas, no annexation by the United States, no Houston booming into a global energy capital, no cowboy mystique fueling American identity. What would the world look like if Texas stayed Mexican? Stick around, because this is one of those turning points where everything changes: politics, power, race, war, and oil. And the ripple effects stretch into our very lives today. In 1836, the battle lines were drawn between the rebellious Anglo settlers of Mexican Texas and the government of President Antonio Lopez de Santa Anna. The historical record tells us the Texians, after early defeats like the Alamo, rallied under Sam Houston and decisively defeated Santa Anna at San Jacinto. Texas gained independence and later joined the United States. But let's rewrite that outcome. Let's say the Battle of San Jacinto ends not with Santa Anna captured, but with Sam Houston dead, his army routed. The Texian cause collapses. Mexico reasserts full control over the territory. The Anglo rebels are either executed or flee east across the Sabine River. In this timeline, Santa Anna's reputation is restored. He emerges as a triumphant dictator, a unifying figure who crushed a secessionist rebellion and preserved the integrity of Mexico. Texas remains a northern frontier province of Mexico, but now it is more tightly controlled. Anglo settlers, those who aren't deported, are stripped of their political influence. The Mexican government initiates a campaign of cultural reassertion: mandatory Spanish in schools, Catholicism reinforced, land redistributed from Anglo squatters to loyal Mexican elites. A brutal pacification follows. The Anglo population that had been swelling in Texas through illegal immigration dwindles. Some leave voluntarily, others face forced displacement. Tejanos who had supported the revolution are accused of betrayal and face harsh reprisals. The region remains tense, militarized, and deeply divided. Meanwhile, in the United States, the loss of Texas deals a major psychological and geopolitical blow. The manifest destiny ethos, still in its infancy, takes a hit. The idea that America was destined to stretch from sea to shining sea now faces its first real roadblock. Expansionists are humiliated. The Democratic Party, which had supported Texas annexation, is weakened, and a growing divide emerges between northern anti-slavery and southern pro-slavery factions, without Texas to act as a potential slave state buffer. The effects ripple quickly into the 1840s and 1850s. Without Texas, the U.S. has no direct border conflict with Mexico. The Mexican-American War likely never happens. That means the U.S. does not seize California, Arizona, New Mexico, Nevada, and Utah in 1848. The entire American Southwest remains firmly Mexican. Gold discovered in California, that's a Mexican story, not an American one. The gold rush of 1849 fuels Mexican industrialization, not American westward expansion. San Francisco becomes a bilingual metropolis of Mexico, not a Pacific jewel of the United States. This creates a radically different map and balance of power. Mexico, now richer with gold and bolstered by the prestige of its northern victories, undergoes a period of reform and modernization, albeit a harsh and uneven one. The central government, emboldened by its ability to suppress Texas, uses authoritarian means to maintain control across its vast and diverse territory. Indigenous groups and local uprisings are put down with increasing brutality. The Mexican political system stagnates into a more rigid, militarized dictatorship that holds but does not harmonize its northern territories. The United States, boxed in east of the Rockies, begins to turn inward. It industrializes faster in the Northeast, but with less Western expansion to relieve population pressures, urban density increases. Tensions between slave and free states come to a head faster. Without Texas and the territory gained through the Mexican-American War, the South lacks crucial new lands to expand slavery. The balance of power shifts decisively in favor of the North. The Civil War might still happen, but it starts earlier, perhaps in the early 1850s, and with a stronger Northern advantage. Alternatively, the war is delayed due to weaker Southern influence, but when it comes, it is short and brutal. Slavery is abolished without ever touching Texas, because in this timeline, Texas is Mexican, and Mexico had already abolished slavery. Now consider the implications for the energy revolution of the 20th century. Texas without the U.S. is a very different place. In our world, Texas became the heart of American oil. Spindletop in 1901 launched a black gold rush that made the U.S. an energy superpower. In this timeline, those oil fields lie within Mexican borders. But does Mexico capitalize on them the same way? It's complicated. Mexican governance of Texas remains authoritarian and corrupt. While oil is discovered and exploited, much of the profit is siphoned off by cronies in Mexico City. Foreign corporations, particularly British and French interests, are invited in for extraction deals, much to the resentment of local populations. By the mid-20th century, the region is politically volatile, rich in resources, but plagued by inequality and unrest. A nationalist movement to reclaim the oil wealth erupts in the 1930s, paralleling Cardenas's real-life expropriation of foreign oil companies. However, in this version, the Texas oil crisis involves guerrilla uprisings and American covert interference. The CIA, eager to protect Western corporate interests, begins meddling in Mexican-Texan affairs, planting seeds of Cold War conflict that could one day blossom into something larger. The Cold War plays out differently too. Without Texas, the U.S. has less oil, less territory, fewer warm water ports. Military bases that once sprawled across Texan land are instead clustered in Louisiana or Oklahoma. The Cuban Missile Crisis may escalate further, with the U.S. more vulnerable to oil shock and less confident in its geopolitical strength. Latin America, seeing a Mexico that resisted U.S. aggression and retained its northern lands, is more inspired toward anti-imperialist resistance. Marxist movements gain strength. The U.S. faces more ideological pushback in the Western Hemisphere. Economically, the absence of Texas stunts the post-war boom. The oil industry, agriculture, and shipping of the Gulf Coast become a tangled knot of foreign interests and contested sovereignty. U.S. corporations increasingly eye Canada and Alaska for energy instead, but these are costlier and less accessible. The American consumer economy remains strong, but less energy independent. By the 1970s, the U.S. is more vulnerable to the OPEC crisis and enters a longer, deeper economic stagnation. The tech boom of the 1990s still happens, but it emerges from California and New York, not Dallas or Austin. Let's not forget immigration. In our timeline, the U.S.-Mexico border has always been a source of tension, especially across the Rio Grande. But without the annexation of Texas and the Mexican cession, the border lies hundreds of miles east. El Paso, Laredo, and the entire Rio Grande Valley remain Mexican cities. The cultural bleed into the U.S. takes a different shape. There's no Tex-Mex cuisine. Spanish remains dominant in these borderlands, and Mexican nationalism is stronger. Migration flows are reduced, but more politicized. The United States, feeling boxed in and increasingly anxious about its stalled westward expansion, institutes stricter immigration policies earlier, often with racially charged rhetoric. Texas, as a Mexican state, never fully stabilizes. By the late 20th century, It is a hotspot of separatist sentiment, not from Anglos this time, but from Tejanos and Mestizos seeking autonomy from a corrupt and distant Mexico City. Cartel violence, endemic in Mexico's real-life northern states, finds a deeper root in oil-rich Texan provinces. Border disputes with the United States erupt sporadically. Cross-border terrorism becomes a reality in the early 2000s. The region becomes a failed state within a fragile Mexican federation. In the modern day, we see a Mexico that is wealthier on paper, thanks to the oil and minerals of Texas and the Southwest, but one deeply fractured by inequality, corruption, and insurgency. The United States, while still a global superpower, is more contained. It never fully embraces manifest destiny, never builds the sprawling interstate system anchored in Houston and Dallas, never sees Texas's voting bloc tilt presidential elections. Politically, America is less polarized but more anxious, its identity less mythic. Global culture shifts too. No Texan swagger means fewer cowboy-themed video games, fewer Western-themed films. America is still a cultural powerhouse, but one less rooted in frontier mythology. The mythos of the Old West never dominates the global imagination in quite the same way. It's a subtler America, perhaps a more self-conscious one, unsure of its place without its most iconic state. By failing to capture Texas, the United States loses a major piece of its soul, but Mexico gains a poisoned chalice, a victory that breeds internal division, foreign meddling, and decades of bloody strife. In this alternate world, the Alamo isn't remembered as a symbol of defiant liberty. It's a reminder of the cost of unresolved empire, a ghost haunting both nations, whispering what could have been.